Have you been told to put your palette in the freezer or the refrigerator so that your paints won't dry out between painting sessions? Yeah, I'm betting you have. This is such common advice, and although it's really well intentioned, it's terrible for a couple of different reasons. Hey there, I'm Mary Gilkerson, and we're going to be diving into this in today's Quick Tip Wednesday, where I'm giving you a fast action tip that you can put practice into your studio really quickly and easily right away. So this is bad advice for a couple of different reasons. Number one, you should never store paint next to food. That really should be enough right there. You shouldn't have to say anything more. But here's why. Paint off gases. And you're going to put that next to food that you're going to eat. Not a good idea. Number two, the temperature below freezing in a freezer will alter the molecular structure of the paint, whether it is oils or acrylics. Now, it's real obvious when you do that with acrylics because it coagulates and it looks like clotted cream. Looks nasty. And so most people know not to do that with acrylics, but they seem to think it's okay with oils. Not true. Definitely not true. So after you've created a really beautiful palette of paint and you have leftovers, the last thing you really should be doing is sticking it in the freezer. Think about a container of vegetable oil. Have you ever left that outside on occasion when the temperatures got really cold? If you have, you'll know that it goes cloudy and it gets really thick and gelatinous. Its molecular structure has changed. It's coagulating, just like that acrylic does. It's just it responds slower than the acrylics. Think about broccoli. What happens to broccoli when you put it in the freezer? It kind of goes to mush. Are you going to do that to your expensive paints? I sure hope not. It's really not a good practice. So, what should you do instead? Well, there are a whole lot of different solutions to this. And I'm going to go through all three mediums, watercolor, acrylic, and oils, and talk about possible solutions that are out there for you that really don't cost a whole lot of money. Now, right up front, watercolors, it's okay if they dry out. You can re-wet them and they'll become soluble again. So it really is not as big an issue with watercolors as it is with the other two mediums. But if you really want to keep it wet and you don't want it to all dry out, then I'd recommend one of these Magillo Fusion Airtight palettes. They really seal tightly. And if you put a damp paper towel in there or a sponge, your watercolors are going to stay wet for a really long time. Now, because you've got water in there, you're going to want to change that sponge or paper towel out at least once a week so you don't get a little scientific growth experiment growing in there. But it'll really keep your paints moist for a very, very long time. Now, if you're working with acrylics, people think you can't keep your palette open for very long. That's not true. Here's a trick that I use in my live workshops so that people who are working in acrylics can keep it open just as long as the oil painters. If you've got a Masterson Stay Wet Premier palette box, it's a piece of cake. It comes with a sponge that you get soaking wet, damp on the bottom. Then you put a layer of palette paper on top and you mix your paints on top of that palette paper. The coolness and the humidity of the damp sponge keeps that paint open for 12 to 14 hours at a time. But say you don't want to buy the palette box. There's some alternatives out there that will give you an even bigger palette and work just as well. So I have a number of students who've used the Nordic Ware aluminum baking sheet with a lid. Baking sheets come in a bunch of different sizes. So I've got the one here that's a half sheet listed, but it really doesn't matter what size. Get the one that suits you. They're airtight anyway, but you can make them even more airtight by putting a line of Vaseline with your finger around that edge. that makes that seal even stronger. And again, what you're going to want to do is put a layer of 3 to 4 paper towels or shop towels down on that tray first. Then put a piece of palette paper on top of that after you've gotten those paper towels or shop towels soaking wet. That, just like the Stay Wet palette, will keep that paint open while it's uncovered for 12 hours at a time. And when you put the lid back on, it'll still be fresh tomorrow. So those work super well. I like the commercial baker's sheet because it's got a low lip, and so it's not too deep for you to work inside of. Now, if you're working in oils, you can use almost any palette box. Masterson has a Stay Wet palette box just for oils. And again, putting a lip, running a line of Vaseline around that lip helps to seal it and keep the air out even more strongly. But it'll work all by itself. There's a little bonus that you can do that works super well, not only with the Masterson, but with any palette box. So, for example, the first palette that I showed you was my Day Tripper palette. And I've done this with my Day Tripper, with my French Mistress easel box, palette box. It's over behind me over there. You just take either a Q-tip or a felt pad with a few drops of clove oil on it. Now, don't mix clove oil with the paint, because that means the paint will never dry. But clove oil has a substance in it that off-gasses in a positive way. And what it off-gasses keeps the paint fresh. It keeps it from drying out and oxidizing. So it works super well to keep your paint open when it's inside a closed box for a long period of time. Even those colors that dry super fast, like the earth colors. So you can use a Q-tip, and if I use a Q-tip, then I'll tape it down in the corner so it won't roll around. But what works super well, shout out to Sheila Walsh, who came up with this idea. Sheila's in my online course, is to use some of those felt pads that are for going on the bottom of legs of furniture, feet of furniture, so they don't scratch the floor. Those felt pads are little circles. They're the perfect size for putting in all 4 corners of your palette box, whatever kind of palette box you're using. Put a couple of drops of that clove oil on top of that felt pad, and that will keep the paint open for days and days and days in a much better shape than if you stuck it in the freezer. Now, you might ask what kind of clove oil. It really doesn't matter. You can order clove oil from Amazon. You can get it from health food stores where they sell essential oils. You can get the therapeutic clove oil from the drugstore. It's all going to work. You just want regular clove oil. And you don't want to mix it with the paint. You want to put it on either a Q-tip or on one of those felt pads in the corner of your palette box. So I hope this has been a real help, and that you now understand that you can save that paint. It's possible to save your paint without sticking it in the freezer. Please don't do that. Don't put paint inside a refrigerator or a freezer. It's just a health hazard, and it's not good for the paint either. Instead, try one of these other methods that are super easy to implement for keeping your paint open for really long extended periods of time. Happy painting, everybody. Talk to you again soon. Bye-bye for now.